National is promising hundreds of millions of dollars in cash handouts, for business at least, if it gets elected come September. It will give $10,000 to employers for each new worker they hire, with individual businesses able to claim up to $100,000 for a total of 10 new staff. The fund will be capped at $500 million, and companies applying for it will have to prove the job is new and permanent. They'll get half the money up front and the other half after 90 days. The scheme would run for 5 months and only applies to existing businesses that would also have to sign declarations stating the job was real. I talked to National's finance spokesperson, Paul Goldsmith, a little earlier and asked him what evidence there is that cash payments would lead to extra jobs being created.
This particular target today is wanting to just encourage small businesses with that $10,000 injection to help them get them over the line to hire an additional person and give somebody a job.
You've accused the government of spraying money around. Well, how is this targeted? What is the evidence that this would create more jobs than would otherwise be created without it? Where is the evidence and how many jobs?
Well, look, I mean, you can't roll out a piece of paper and say this is the evidence that it will create additional jobs. I'm sure every small business that you talk to will say, look, on the margins, they'll be thinking about whether they could go from 4 employees to 5. And if this helps tip a few of those small businesses over the line to take a chance, take a punt, take that extra person, it'll be helpful. And also, it's fundamentally a way of getting some cash into the hands of those businesses.
So it's a subsidy. It's a subsidy you're subsidising rather than incentivising.
Yeah, well, you were encouraging those small businesses to take on that extra person, recognising the extraordinary circumstances that we are. Well, this is not something that would normally
How do you know they wouldn't have already taken that person on, though? Because if there is, growth in their business, they'll be looking to take people on. They would create a job anyway. Sure, and if this $10,000 helps them in their business and encourages them to continue to grow and expand, then it will be a useful thing. We're talking about, at the moment, at the very good times, the New Zealand economy under the last 2 years of National was creating about 10,000 new jobs a month. And we're thinking for the first 5 months of the next government term, we will be desperate for new jobs. And, we talk about the health services heroes during the lockdown. Well, the heroes of the next period of our national history will be those small businesses who take a chance, hire a new person and look to expand. And we just want to make it a bit easier for them to do that. But isn't the critical point that you were saying that this is to create more jobs, yet you have no evidence it will create more jobs, and there's no way of knowing whether that business would have created the job anyway? So it's just a cash handout.
Like I say, there will be instances where it will tip businesses over the edge and give them the encouragement to take on that extra person. And if it's a way to get some extra dollars into the hands of those small businesses that are really struggling at the moment, we think in the circumstances that's worthwhile, and it will help with that overall recovery. It's not the only thing that we're going to do, of course. The critical thing is core good quality government practice. It's about keeping regulations low, not overtaxing, not changing all the rules all the time, allowing investment to flow. All those things are important, as is good quality infrastructure.
Can you give us the name of a specific business?
The Minister of Finance was keen to, not really, he was broadly supportive of it. He was struggling to find some reasons to argue against it and didn't really come up with them.
Okay, I'm wanting to ask you about your policy and what you're doing. So can you name a specific small business who's really keen on this idea and says it would encourage them to bring on more people?
Well, I'm not going to go out and say that the pie shop in Tamaranui is in favour of this particularly, or the hairdresser in Whangamata.
Because presumably you've spoken to some of them, small businesses. If you think they need it, you must have canvassed them. So can you just give us maybe one name of someone who says they would take on more workers as a consequence of this?
Well, I'm not going to come up with individual examples. What we're talking about is a sector which is responsible for, there are 500,000 small businesses in this country, most of them sole traders, and about 100,000 of them have between 1 and 5 employees. And like I say, if we could persuade or if we could encourage some of them to take a chance and take on an extra person, that will make it easier. And that's what we're looking for. At the moment, look, I don't think people quite appreciate the scale of the economic challenge that we face. We heard only yesterday that the country's lost 37,000 jobs over April, and the projections are absolutely terrible for the next few months ahead. So, we need to have first and foremost stopping the pain by opening up the economy, getting cash into the hands of those businesses that need it.
I think your leader made it very clear about the situation that he believes we're facing. He said yesterday, and I'm quoting him here, most New Zealanders are unemployed, but they don't know it yet. So where does that figure come from? And how many people is he saying? If he's saying most New Zealanders are unemployed, what is he saying, 50%, 51%? That's most?
No, I think what he was referring to there was the fact that we've got 1.7 million New Zealanders currently being supported by the wage subsidy. And the big unknown question right now is how many of those 1.7 million New Zealanders who are being supported by the wage subsidy have in fact are working for a company that won't survive the end of the wage subsidy.
He said most New Zealanders are unemployed. No, this is really important because National puts itself up as the party of numbers, the party who is in control of the economy. He specifically said he can read his spreadsheet and he's good with numbers. He came out and said most New Zealanders are unemployed, but they don't know it yet. Was he just throwing around an inaccurate figure here, a really important figure?
Yeah, what's really important, and I'm quite clear what he was referring to, and that was the 1.7 million New Zealanders currently receiving the wage subsidy.
So is he saying they're all going to become unemployed when the subsidy runs out?
No, well, the question that we don't know, nobody knows, is how many of those are going to be facing unemployment at the end of the wage subsidy period. So
did he just make that figure up?
Well, look, I didn't hear the reference to most, and if it was said, I'm sure it was.
So is he wrong?
In relation to something else. No, I'm not saying he's wrong. I just didn't hear the quote, and I heard him talking about that exact situation only an hour or so ago, and that he was referring to the people on the wage subsidy, those 1.7 million New Zealanders. And there's no point sort of trying to sort of win points over this or anything. I think that's simply a simple reference to the fact that there are a lot of New Zealanders on the wage subsidy. Nobody knows how many of those people actually don't have a job or won't have a job at the end of that wage subsidy period.
And can voters trust the National Party when referring to the economy to stick with the facts then?
We'll do our absolute best to get it right, and we'll make a few mistakes from time to time, but I'm very confident that we will do our best to describe the situation as accurately as we can, and also to provide practical and effective ways to get New Zealand back on track.
And that was National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith